to be here. I've been here all day and it's been fascinating. I've really enjoyed all the talks so far and lots of nodding and recognition at things. And so there'll be common themes that I'm going to touch on as I go through this talk. So my name is Anne Johnstone. I'm head of ESG at Vital Energi. And I'm going to talk to you today about how we've been working with One Click, specifically on improving carbon importing in energy infrastructure, so renewable energy infrastructure. I'm going to be talking about the Cinderella of the building world today, which is heat decarbonisation. I don't know if anyone's had much of a chance to look at the industrial strategy that's just been published, but like in a lot of things, heat gets very, very small mentions. And given that it's 40% of the UK's carbon emissions that it accounts for, really there needs to be an awful lot more emphasis on this and a lot more data and a lot more information. It kind of falls between two stools, between buildings and electricity generation. And I think that's why it's not understood very well by a lot of people and it tends to get overlooked. So can I just have a little bit of a show of hands about, has anybody heard of Vital Energi before? Yeah, okay. Has anybody worked on a heat network? Yeah, okay, good, okay, a few people. So Vital Energi is as I said, it's a renewable energy company. We're a privately owned company. We've been around for about 30 years. And for around probably 20 of those years, the vast majority of what we did was heat networks that were powered by CHPs. So gas, putting pipes in the ground to distribute heat to multiple buildings, but mainly powered by gas. And then about 10 years ago, that started to change, and we started to look at heat pumps and electrifying those systems. And now we do all sorts of things. We build heat pumps, or we're about to start. We design them, but we're about to start building them. We do solar PV. We're doing BESS. We install energy efficiency measures in buildings, and we own and operate an energy from waste plant in the Midlands, and we're about to start another one in the north of England. So this is a very small selection of our projects, but it's just to kind of give a bit of an indication of the types of projects and their distribution across the UK. So we've got Torry Heat Network, which is a heat network in Aberdeen, which is taking heat from an energy from waste plant run by Aberdeen Heat and Power. We've got the Queen's Quay Energy Centre in Clydebank, just outside Glasgow, which is Scotland's only river source heat pump. We have Liverpool Waters, which is a similar, so that's been installed by Peel and is another river source heat pump. So these are industrial sized heat pumps where the refrigerant is ammonia. The pumps are being built in Glasgow by a company called Star Refrigeration, and the energy centre has been designed by us. And our headquarters is in Blackburn, so a lot of the work and the IP and everything that's going on with heat is actually being done within the UK. We've got a heat network in Wales called Dyffryn. We've just replaced that. That was an old heat network that was sort of like 30, 40 years old, and we've gone in and completely replaced it. Our Leeds PIPES project is one of the fastest growing heat networks in the UK. So Leeds City Council started that project about 6 years ago, and we're now up to about 40 kilometres of pipe across the whole of Leeds, with a lot of the kind of municipal buildings attached to it. So the Civic Hall, the Town Hall, the courts, the Playhouse, Leeds Playhouse, St James's Hospital. A lot of these big municipal buildings are connected to that network, but the first buildings that were connected to it were social housing, and there's a number of blocks of flats in some very deprived areas of Leeds where the tenants are now getting low-cost, reliable heat coming from the heat network. And we've just been appointed as the delivery partner for Gatwick Airport's £250 million decarbonisation of the entire airport estate. So that's going to comprise a heat network connecting the north and south terminals, and then individual decarbonisation of around 50 buildings. So there is a lag, however, in life cycle analysis, whole life carbon assessment in energy infrastructure. And I'm not going to kind of read all of that out, but just to kind of generally go through it, the reason for that, a lot of that has been covered by other people in the course of today. But the main reason for it is that there has been standards and legislation that cover buildings, but not really covered in building services, or not until very, very recently. And so because of things like BREEAM, because of things like RICS, because of big infrastructure projects like HS2, buildings and transport have developed an approach to whole life carbon assessment. But because building services is a relatively small part of that overall, so it's a bit like the thing that Charlie was talking about, you know, do you do absolutely everything, or do you focus on your sort of, you know, your big carbon pools to begin with? It was generally in that sphere, we were only really looking at operational energy until very, very recently. But that is starting to change. And, you know, if you look at SIBSE, look at the SIBSE journal, there's lots and lots of information now. And I really, you know, William's talk this morning about all the stuff that Schneider's doing is fantastic. Because one of the biggest challenges that we have, and I'll kind of pick up on this again, but it really is the availability of EPDs when we're going out to our supply chain and trying to get that information. But, you know, why does it matter? Again, operational energy is only one small part of carbon as a whole. And a lot of our clients, so, you know, a lot of the work that we do is for public sector organisations, so local authorities, hospitals, universities, and they've, you know, they've declared climate emergencies, they've set net zero targets, and they want to know about their scope 3. So just focusing on operational energy isn't enough. However, obviously, when we're going in and delivering infrastructure that is going to remove fossil fuels and reduce their scope 1 and 2 to 0, then that operational energy bit might be huge, an order of magnitude bigger than the embodied carbon side of things. So I think that's I'll come back to that as well later, but it is an important thing to bear in mind. So yes, it is important to know all of this, but for the purposes of what we're talking about, you know, infrastructure that is decarbonising heat, then the operational energy side of things is the end goal. But because of that, and that was the focus, there's not really been an awful lot of information gathering about all those other areas. So, you know, everything in like A1 to B5, and then the C and D, and we really need that. You know, we can't ignore it altogether. So we need that information. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this specific project that we're doing for Lancaster University, because effectively, as I said, Vital have been doing this for 30 years, but no one had asked us for information about embodied carbon until 2 years ago. So I've only been at Vital for 2 years. I started almost 2 years ago to the day. It was like the 1st of July 2023. And then in August 2023, a tender came in from Lancaster, initially to build a solar farm, and then to deliver what they're calling the LUNZIP, the Lancaster University Net Zero Infrastructure Project. And that was the first time that we had ever been asked to specifically been asked to do an embodied carbon assessment. And so my kind of question is, well, if we'd not been doing it, who is doing it? And I don't think to that. I think the answer is probably no one, really. But in that 2 years, we're now starting to see it come up, and probably most of the tenders that we're working on right now want some information about embodied carbon. But the problem is they want they've looked at RICS, they've looked at PAS 2080, they want a target, and we're like, well, actually, we can't really do that. Especially pre-REBA 2, we're very much relying on generic information and proxies. And if we want to be able to do that kind of, say meaningfully, what is the embodied carbon of a heat network? What is the embodied carbon of an industrial size heat pump? Then there's a whole load more information needs to be in platforms like One Click and in the public domain than there is at the moment. So just a few specifics about this project. It's been funded by so Lancaster University secured £21 million from the Green Heat Network Fund to deliver it. We're building a new energy centre and extending an existing district heat network. The energy centre is going to be powered by an innovative, it's not been done in the UK before, so it's a combination of air source and water source heat pumps. 7 megawatts, and there will also be a 1 megawatt e-boiler. There will be 1,500 metres of thermal stores, so 8 22-metre high tanks, and then a private wire connection from the actual district heat network itself is about 6.5 kilometres around the campus. They've got an existing wind turbine. We have just built a solar farm for them, which is completing in September, and there will be a private wire from the solar farm and the wind turbine to the energy centre. Once they've done all of that, that will decarbonise 95% of the university campus, saving them something like 2,700 tonnes of carbon a year. But it's a massively ambitious project. It's sector leading for higher education, and it is really difficult to do a carbon assessment on, but we're trying. So because we didn't, when they came and asked us to do the carbon assessment for the solar farm, they said, we want to see case studies, we want to see examples. And we hadn't done it before, so we had to say, right, hands up, we've not done this before. So we appointed Arup to help us. We were like, Arup are going to help us do this. So Arup came in and helped us do the whole life carbon assessment for the solar farm. But we recognised a need to upskill internally. We were like, we don't really want to be constantly relying on consultants to do this. But also, we've got over 100 design engineers within our own business. We're a turnkey provider. We should be doing this. We should have this knowledge and expertise. So we did a bit of market testing and identified One Click as the platform of our choice. I presented the case to the board, and they agreed, and that's when we sort of got on board with One Click. So that was probably around about a year ago, and since then we've been applying it to LUNZIP, but also some other projects as well. So we'll be doing it for Gatwick because they've got an ambition to become PAS 2080 certified as an asset owner. We are working for TfL, we're doing it for them. Who else are we doing it for at the moment? Yeah, there's lots. So I've said it's really kind of ramping up very, very quickly. What we did specifically with LUNZIP was that we had a kick-off carbon workshop with the site team, the QS, the client, the project managers who are AECOM, and some of our key contractors. And then we've got so I have a member of my team who has basically she's been becoming our carbon assessor. So she goes to site every 2 weeks and actually sits down with the site team and sits down with the contractors and is getting information out of them, gathering information from them. And we're onboarding subcontractors throughout the project, as well as liaising with our suppliers. And then in addition to that, we're having regular internal workshops with all the different departments within Vital, so with our design team, with the commercial team, with the work-winning team, to make sure that they understand what this is all about, what One Click is, what we're using it for, how it's transforming our business. And this is really nascent. It's, it is obviously very, very early days, but ultimately, what I see is that it will be a tool. Everybody will be using it. It will just become part of what we do, the same way that those calculations around operational energy are second nature. That's basically our bread and butter. So some of the things that we've actually learned through doing it. Material transfer notes. Some of our contractors have been really good and very, very organised. So we've got a civils contractor called Ruttles, and they've been excellent at in the format of the information that they've given us. But others are not like that. So over 81%, I think it was when we did our sustainability report, of our supply chain are SMEs or micro businesses. And when I say micro businesses, I mean like like literally a man with a van. And that is a challenge. It's really difficult. How do you get them? I think like James talked about this, and we do use Supply Chain Sustainability School. How do you get them? How do you understand that we need this information in order to satisfy our clients? And essentially what we're saying to them just now is we are only measuring this right now. Right now, we're just trying to understand where we are. So we're going to ask you for this information. You might not be able to give it to us right now, but we are going to ask you, and we're going to keep asking you. If you need help, come and ask us as the kind of bigger contracting entity, and we will help you, or get help from someone else, whatever you do. But we're going to keep asking the question. This isn't going to go away. So if you're not currently geared up to do this, then you need to get there, because although we're asking right now, there will come a point sometime in the future, probably not that far away, where we will be making decisions because we'll be forced to, because we might not get work if we don't do that. Recording machine hours is another thing that's a bit of a challenge, and EPDs, it's been talked about lots. But we did have quite a, we've had some really encouraging examples as well. So that EPD there is from Isoplus, who provide our pipe. And it turned out that they had EPDs for the exact product that we were buying from them, which was great, but it wasn't in the One Click library, but it will be now. So that's a big win. We're really chuffed with that. And that's another, this is part of the challenge, because again, when we're looking at these things, like we've not got to the point yet, we are putting the pipe work in the ground, and we're doing we've done the piling for the energy centre and the thermal store bases, but that's as far as we've got. So we're not into the whole bit yet but the energy centre and putting the MEP in and looking at the heat pumps and all of that sort of stuff. But we already know, because we've started to ask suppliers for this information, that very, very few of them have done the EPDs, and there aren't really that many in the library either for the specialised kit that we're using. So that part of that raising the bar is this. We want there to be more, we want our work and our relationship with One Click to be generating more of this information that will go into the EPD library, that will go into the tool, that will go into developing the platform in a way that makes it better at doing the specific types of energy infrastructure projects that we are delivering. So that's our key challenges and lessons learned. The data gaps for MEP, again, been talked about. Simon just talked about it earlier in terms of, was talking about RECs and the limitations of RECs. So there's a number, some of which have already been highlighted. So we have referred to RECs, but we are not using it. We're not using the pro forma because basically we can't. So things like the 120-year reference study period don't really work for us. We can apply them to the building. We could apply them to the pipe work, arguably. But because it makes an assumption that you replace things like for like over the lifetime, there is absolutely no way that a heat pump that we're putting in now is going to be the same, and will have a 15 to 20-year lifespan, is going to be replaced by a like-for-like heat pump. That's just not going to happen. We are innovating heat pumps right now. We're working with Birmingham University to develop a new thermal store material that will basically be the size of this. So, there's no point in doing an embodied carbon assessment that basically says this heat pump that I'm putting in now is going to be replaced 4 times in the lifespan of this energy centre, because that's not going to happen. Procurement and design are still being driven by cost and programme over carbon. So there is work to be done to get carbon up and get to that level. And the kind of client knowledge about that is really important. And I think there'll be a lot of consultants in the room, and I think that's an ask from me to you is trying to make sure that when you're doing that early stage feasibility work, that you're having conversations with your client about what's realistic and that it's pragmatic, and also that if there's work that they need to do before they bring something to market, before they put out a tender, that it's done, and they're not expecting contractors to be able to deliver something that by the time we get into contract, it's already too late. So a lot of the kind of procurement decisions, sometimes planning has been awarded, and you know, when we're looking at those kind of things, essentially, we can't make any other decision than it's got to be a steel palisade fence rather than a timber one or whatever. You know, we just don't have that option anymore. So that early stage carbon literacy and those contractual levers are really important. And then again, as I said, although it is important to understand embodied carbon in Scope 3, and I am not diminishing that in any way, we have to keep in mind that for energy infrastructure, there is this bigger picture of the reason that we are doing this work is to remove fossil fuels from the energy mix. That's what we're doing. And electrifying heat is problematic for all sorts of reasons at the moment, but not least the price of electricity. And that's reflected in the fact that you can electrify a building and get a worse EPC because of the cost, and also that's also reflected in the approach in the RICS guidance. So if you look at Appendix H and the fair share rule, arguably, well, my interpretation of that is, well, would we be penalised if we applied that approach to a heat network? And there's also lots and lots of other issues about how you attribute the carbon if you've got loads of different customers and all that, but we won't go into that now. So what we've found by using One Click is that it's improving our standardisation and our transparency. It's helping us to see where those carbon hotspots are in terms of applying it to our projects, and we will be making very good use of that feedback, of putting all of our recommendations in for things that we think might help enhance its utility. Because we don't, we want to drive forward excellence in the sector. We've got heat network zoning legislation coming forward. Heat networks are what should be and will be a really important part of meeting the UK's net zero targets. And we want to make sure that Vital, we as Vital and the expertise that we've built up in this is genuinely helping to kind of raise those standards and deliver excellence. And I think that might be, so a few recommendations then. Embed carbon as a decision-making criteria right from the beginning, because that's not happening right now. It really isn't. We do need more tailored guidance. So I think there will have to be a RICS 3rd edition. I'm very happy to be involved in it. We want to encourage public sector clients to demand more about carbon accountability and procurement, and promote that collaboration across the supply chain. So really, the key thing, the most important thing is that we improve data quality and availability. So what we found in our very short journey of this so far is that it is adding value to our energy infrastructure projects. It's helping improve our credibility. It's given us actionable insights, and that is, particularly with our client at Lancaster, they've responded really well to that, and I think we've all learned. And it really is an exemplar project. And when we get to the end of it, I think it will be really important for the building and built environment sector as a whole. So we're still a couple of years away, obviously, from that. But it's the fact that the fact that project is happening and other ones like it, I think will be transformational. And I really kind of look forward to sharing that with everybody. Thank you very much.